Thank you. The sun's off there behind that tree. So, good evening, everybody. When I was at Patricia Hardy's closed class out at the Sportsman's Lodge the first week in July, she played a tape. For those of you who want to look it up, it was the 1956 First Steinway Hall closed class, tape 3, side B. And it's a healing tape, which I thought would be a really good thing to talk about on Monday night, since this is a healing group. And I noticed that all of the people there, all of these are all Barber students, me and 15 other people, and they're all Barber students. And I noticed that the topic was healing fear. Okay? He's talking about healing fear is what the tape is about. And, I just immediately heard healing kid. And everybody else seemed to just be thinking about healing fear. So, they're obviously not in terms of kid there. But it was really clear to me that, that fear and kid are synonymous, so that there ought to be something there. And so I listened to it again last week, and I listened to it again this morning, and today I took 2 pages of notes. There are lots of different ways of dealing with kid, and we all work at different levels. Not even different levels, but different paths, I think. And some of us very specifically work with the kid as if it were a separate entity that needed to be dealt with and talked with and worked through stuff, and that seems to work. Others, there's one student in particular who's really got caught up in Nick Johnson's mind and intellect, and she now is just looking at kid as beliefs in the intellect. And, she's now dealing with her kid quite successfully, apparently, just saying, oh, that's just the intellect. And not putting any, not giving it any power. And others have been aware that, why can't the kid be healed? Why aren't we healing kid? There's no power in any of this stuff. There's no power in the kid. There's no power, kids don't have power. Beliefs don't have power. None of this stuff has power. And of course, the caveat there is none of these things have power in the presence of a realized consciousness. Okay? It's awfully easy. And we do that a lot. We say, oh, there's no power in that, there's no power in that, there's no power in disease, there's no power in cancer, there's no power in this, there's no power in that. And yet, the world is dying from all these things. The answer is there is no power in any of these things in the presence of a realized consciousness. Without the presence of a realized consciousness, there are material powers and there are mental powers, and kid is definitely a mental power. And fear is a mental power, okay? But anyway, let's look at, I want to spend some time on, hopefully this week and maybe next week even, I'd rather spend Monday night approaching the kid and script work from a different viewpoint than status reports on how we're doing with it and stuff like that. That's what Saturday and Sunday are for. And I'd like to be bringing in truth and answering questions about truth, but this tape was especially interesting to me because, the thing that caught my ear, first of all, is the basis of all discord is fear, he says. Barbara says the source of all misery is script, okay? And script and fear, you're really clear that script and fear are synonymous, okay? I mean, script are particular fears, not, and there are fears that don't produce script, but the basis of all discord is fear. And nothing is going to remove that fear but one thing. As power is removed from the external and realized as an activity of one's inner being, fear disappears. And in no other way. And it's Joel talking.
Read that again.
Yeah, I will. This is a very clear guy who's talking. He says, the basis of all discord is fear, and nothing is going to remove fear but one thing. As power is removed from the external, as we recognize that nothing in the external has power, okay? Removed from the external and realized. You have to realize this, we not know it, but realized as an activity of one's own inner being. Power, the only source of power in the entire universe is your own inner being. When power is removed from the external and realized as an activity of one's own inner being, fear disappears. And then he says, and in no other way. Okay, so what he's saying is the only way to finish kid work. And this is really interesting, this whole year has been about how to finish kid work. The only way to finish kid work is to get rid of the fear, right? Finishing kid work and eliminating fear are the same, okay? The only way to finish kid work is to realize, and that means realize to the bottom of your kid, that the power is in one's own being, is in the spiritual adult. So, that's sort of a clear statement, and of course it just brings up a myriad of things, and I'm really hoping that that I or we or some of you, that somewhere tonight we get some unfoldment, because again I say, yeah, easily said, but do it, I mean, obviously if you have a realized consciousness, well, I was about to say, obviously if you have a realized consciousness, there's not a problem. And yet Barbara taught script for 25 years and had a kid problem. But that was because she hadn't addressed it, you see? She hadn't addressed it. She hadn't heard this tape. And she hadn't addressed it. It seems to me that if you have a realized consciousness and have realized, it doesn't seem to me, it's my experience, that if you have realized the one source of power, that there is no fear in you, okay? That there is no fear. I don't have fear of anything, okay? I mean, I can get, if you push me off a cliff, adrenaline will jump up and that sort of thing, but, I'm just not afraid of anything in the real world, because I don't think because I realize that there's nothing external that can touch me in any way. Knowing who I am, it can't touch me, okay? But, so if you have realized that, then what's left is old ideas, old tapes, old habits. And there is a lot of conditioning, and Adele can speak to this, there's a lot of conditioning to react the same way to the same situation, even if you know better, even if you have realized better, even if you are in spiritual adult, because we have enough spiritual adult in here to go address the kid and such like, but even if you're in spiritual adult, there is still, it's like Robert talked about pulling the plug out of the fan, but the fan has to spin down. It has momentum. That's exactly the right word. It has momentum. And it's also, locked up in the body. I mean, the tears have to be cried, and the screams have to be screamed, and the anger has to be angered, and all that stuff has to happen, has to get out of the body, because it's locked up in the body, and that's where the kid lives, and that's where that's what these old tapes are. It's the stuff that's clenched up in the body, and it's clenched up muscular and all that. But what's coming to me is that if we have, and to the extent that we have realized only one power, we can, when a fear comes up, just look at it and say, oh, that's a fear, that's nonsense, there's no power in that, and go on. Yeah, jump in.
You know,
This is wide open. This is wide open. I want a lot of feedback.
no, that really resonates
I
with
knew it
me.
would resonate.
And
I'm so glad when you walked in here.
what comes for an example to me is even not having any experience with it, but just the intellectual knowledge. I remember I was at Agape once, and and I was in the middle of the kid work, and really into bottom line, you feel like you're going to die, and we hear it all the time in the class. It's rejection unto death. And Reverend Michael was giving a pitch on immortality and being immortal. Now, I have no experience, no experience to base that on, but I was just sitting there, and when he said that, I made the connection, and it's like, okay, well, if I'm immortal and I can never die, then why am I afraid? It was like he was speaking to my kids. Then I can't die. I can't ever die. And it immediately just went like that. It wiped it out. It was like, wow. And all that is an example of is a spiritual truth canceling out a lot. Even though I had no experience with it, it's just, I heard it. Yes.
He had. Okay, so you were in the presence of a realized consciousness.
Yes.
And you were lifted.
Yeah.
You transcended it, which is what healing is all about. See, he healed your kid. You get that?
Yeah. I didn't see it then, but I remember it just, it like went right in. It was like.
That was a kid healing.
Yeah. What am I afraid of then?
Absolutely proof. That was a kid healing. And it took his consciousness to lift you to the point that it was not intellectual. You got it. Yeah.
Yeah.
You bought the immortality because he was telling you that.
And I trusted him.
Yeah.
There was somebody that came.
You bought it from him.
Right.
You bought the immortality.
Yeah.
And you would know if you had, you trusted him because of your experience of his consciousness.
Yeah.
Okay? So that's exactly it. He says, his point is that all of these fears, by the way, he says explicitly that all these fears are ultimately based on the fear of death. You wouldn't be afraid of being sick if you weren't afraid of dying from it. You might prefer not to be sick, but you're not afraid of the flu. We're afraid of cancer, right? We're not afraid of the flu, because flu won't kill us. We'd rather not have it, but we're afraid of cancer because we're afraid cancer will kill us. The point is that, and that was what Patanjali's, one of his 5 sources of problems was the fear of death. Remember, he didn't have the fear in pointing. And this is Patanjali's 5 causes of suffering. It was explicitly the fear of death, not just fear in general. It was explicitly the fear of death. And that's the root of all the fears, actually. And Joel was consistent with that.
Oh yeah, because doesn't he say self-preservation is the first law?
Yeah.
So that goes along.
Sure.
Yeah. You know what?
And that's parents' job.
Yeah.
And that's parent. That's what parent is. Parent is all about self-preservation because parent is afraid of death. Parent is the, so to speak, personification of the fear of death. Who wanted to speak?
Well, I was thinking that it's just really interesting about there isn't any fear that I can take out and look at and believe anymore that I'm aware of at this moment. And what I find is just, I don't know, the groove that comes in is this feeling, and it's different than fear. It's terror. It's a feeling of terror. And when and that in certain situations, I'm realizing that I'll have a visceral kind of response to that. And if I pick it up and look at it, it is irrational and it doesn't hold up. But it does seem to be just locked in, and that it's different from fear. It really is different because it's not of anything. Even when I take out the, I don't even believe the script anymore. I don't believe any of it. Yet I'm having this really and I'm also having this experience of sadness. A sadness. I always felt I had a hard time with anger. It's not, the anger is a powerful feeling, but I'm having a lot of like old feelings of sadness around all that, around being terrified for all my life. And it's really interesting just to kind of experience all these without getting into the drama of them. And just kind of really real aware of it.
And that's it. I mean, it's still in the body. And it's still in the brain, so to speak. You know, it's in the grooves in the brain. It's in the body. It's in the muscles. We're all clenched up, hanging on to shit. Yeah, literally. I mean, clenched up. I mean, go to a masseuse and he'll work on a spot and he'll burst into tears. Because you had tears clenched up in that spot, you know?
Don't you just think that sometimes it's a habitual reaction?
Absolutely.
It's so, like a groove in a record. It's just so, you know, and it just takes a while to like, oh yeah, that has no power anymore, you know?
Yeah, I believe that. I certainly think it's like a groove in the record. And,
Well, it was really interesting today. Adele had an experience yesterday, and she described it to me today in an instant message. She described how she was feeling. And I was able to take that feeling and experience it myself. And I've carried it with me all day today. And it's just, and it's not a fear, it's not a terror, but it's a sadness. It was a remembering a certain time in my life about waiting to be loved, waiting to be acknowledged, waiting to be just picked up and taken along. And, you know, when I got that from her, you know, I mean, the first thing that came to my mind was, you know, well, sweetheart, you're the one who gets to pick you up and take you along, but that didn't take me from, or that seeing that truth immediately did not, I didn't, as soon as that left, I went and experienced that same emotion for myself, not for her, or not to share it with her or anything, but I just felt it. And so today I've been very unsettled, just feeling that. And that's, I think it's just that stuff being released, and I guess that those things just have to come out.
I was listening today too, where the mind, you get it in the mind, but you have to slow down and really experience that in the body in order to really lock it in. Otherwise, the mind wants to skip on to the next thing and there's knowledge. But to really hang with that and just really, so you really feel it in the body. Yeah.
Actually, it's right here. It's right here. It's, you know, the first thing I did when I was listening to her, when I'm calming myself or when I'm reassuring myself it's up here, but this is down about 4 or 5 inches, and it's just, it's amazing what's coming up.
yeah, that's the difference between the heart and the solar plexus.
Yeah.
The solar plexus is where all that shit's locked in. That's where my glitch is.
Yes.
Just immediately below the sternum.
Right.
Nothing to do with heart.
Yeah.
Most of my life is...
You reassure at the heart level.
Yeah.
What does
What does that mean? Because for a very long time, and I haven't had this in a couple of years, but for a lot of years in sobriety, my heart was tight, like right here. And it's just,
Sure.
here it is. It's my buddy right here, and it's clenched, and it's not letting go. And so I just lived with it, you know, I just had to live with it. And I don't know what happened a couple of years ago, it kind of like finally released, but what I'll do is working some steps. But is there a difference between that and the solar plexus feeling?
Sure.
This is more of a glitch, that's more of anxiety.
Well, for me, it's a glitch. I don't know. Now, the heart is you know, the heart chakra is love. The fact is, if you were unable to love, you were shut down. That's in the heart and the throat.
You know, there's a really good book by Gurmukh, who's a Kundalini master that Jessie took. Jessie was her teacher, and it's called the 8 Human Talents, and it goes through each chakra, and it's, you know, and it's the heart, solar plexus, and it talks about holding energy there, and like what we're talking about, you know, like here right now, just, and what happens when it's released, and how old memories are held there, and it's just energy in the body, like you were saying. Yeah, and it just needs a release.
And different places are different types of
Yes.
different blocks. I mean,
Yes.
like the heart is no ability to love, the throat is no ability to express.
Yeah.
Your expression is shut down, you know.
And also to trust, I was reading, and I had never read this before, it not only your expression, but to trust your own inner wisdom, which I found that was like, oh.
Yeah, teachers are open.
Else you won't express it, see.
Yeah, yeah,
The lack of trust will keep you shut down.
yeah.
Yeah.
When my father died, I felt it right here for about 4 months, and it was delicious in the breaking of the heart. You know, just the sadness of it. But I was conscious of it almost every moment for 4 months. It was an amazing experience.
I have a question. I've been listening to some Adishanti, and I recognize a lot of very specific hidden script stuff within that. And one of the things that Michael brought up is something that I've heard him say quite a few times about non-resistance and kind of being where you are. And, you know, certainly for a long time in here, I have stuffed anger and fear and everything else in an attempt to be spiritual. And one of the things that I'd like to hear somebody with experience on, or your translation of it, or whatever, is being kind of where you are or what you are, without just kind of letting the kid run free with resistance behaviors and everything else. But what does that really mean, to just be where you are and not to resist the anger or the fear or whatever?
Well, I'm sure it's a personal thing for everybody. Certainly we have the experience of talking about letting the spiritual adult set the stage so that the kid can express its rage. And, you know, that certainly is an example of being who you are. I mean, certainly who we are is the rage and the tears, and we certainly need to express it. The rest of it is questions of appropriateness, which is the big bugaboo in Western society, you know, whether or not you can be who you are, you know, if who you are is unacceptable to the crowd you're in or something like that, you know.
Who was that guy? I think Osho talked about it, that one guy that went through Europe and just was crazy, and then he burned it all out, and then...
He was talking about himself.
Oh, that was himself.
Oh, that guy.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, Joel says a little about that. He says, don't try to heal your own fear. Don't try to heal the fear of your patients. You can't do that. Let them fear a little more. The more they fear, the more they will see that their fear didn't do anything. Realize that fear is a universal activity, an activity of universal belief, and nail it right there. Okay, so fear is not my fear. It's a universal belief, you know, and we're saying the parent is universal belief, okay? So recognize that fear is a universal activity, an activity of universal belief, and nail it right there. Then realize there cannot be two powers. There cannot be power in God and in the fears. So let the fear go on and do its worst. Don't try to remove it, rise above it, or overcome it. Why should you? If its only power is the power you were giving it to it by accepting the world belief. So he's saying, yeah, go ahead and fear. Don't worry about it. But know that there's no power in it. There's a lot in this tape about that the only power that these fears have is the power we give it. Or the power that humanity gives it, the power that world belief gives it, you know, that's the apparent power.
you give so much power to everything around us that if we're going to be acceptable in this situation, that it creates the whole, it keeps it going.
Sure, that's the biggest problem with Western society, is being acceptable.
How am I going to look?
Being appropriate, yeah, that's the whole thing. Being appropriate is the reason that everybody has all this. I mean, Adishani is obviously right on. I mean, do it with your 4-year-olds. The reason people have this repressed rage and repressed tears and everything is because it wasn't appropriate to express it. There's no appropriate way in Western society to express rage. Oh, sadness for a man, tears for a man, rage for anybody.
Or even to tell the truth about what you're experiencing when you're small.
Yep.
Yeah.
Even when you're old. Yeah, I mean, Sheming. And then there's the whole thing about the difference between the story that I told myself and what actually happened. That, it's breaking all this down and just trying not to let it run my life.
Why don't we listen to that tape one week?
Yeah. Well, maybe we will in the future sometime.
Okay.
Or anybody that wants to hear it can. We have that tape, obviously. In fact, I would suggest that everybody hear it. Maybe we will. I don't know what's happening in the future, but that's not what we're doing now.
This stuff on Monday evenings has been really fun. I've just letting it bounce around the room has really been exciting for me.
So he's talking a lot about healing. He's a healer, so he's talking about healing other people's fear. And the question, the problem with healing other people's fear is that you lift them above it, but then they can't maintain it.
I can always rise above other people's fear.
He says a demonstration will not remove the fear. It may happen again or be lost. Whatever you can get lifted out of your fear, but whatever you're afraid of may happen again, or you may be afraid that what you received is lost or something like that. It's necessary not merely to heal, but to be sure the student is studying to learn how to remain well. I love that statement. And we're all doing that in this crowd that's here.
You know what I'm realizing, even listening, I've kind of been watching it this week, is that when I get certain, usually physiological responses, I get a tightening in my chest, I start breathing, and hold on. I've been constipated for 48 years now. Just that holding on. And when that happens, I interpret that as fear. That's the interpretation. I will tell myself I'm afraid. If I take it out and look at it, I'm not really afraid. But it just occurs to me that I'm interpreting a set of physiological responses as fear still, even though that's not true. And that my body does this stuff when I try the things that remind me of things I've tried when I've been afraid. And
Your condition.
yeah, but that's a really good exercise.
Catalogue was right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's been astounding the last few weeks. And maybe every time that I feel those responses now, to know that, hey, this is just physiological. Let's take a look at this. This is a good exercise.
Yeah. This is just because I used to be afraid in this situation.
Yeah.
He says, first start in small ways. Don't teach this, but practice it silently within yourself. He's talking about healing other people, but I like the end of this comment. So if someone needs help, it's because they're fearing. Anybody coming to him for help now, he says, you start this with the people that are coming to you. If someone comes to you for help, it's because they're fearing.
Right.
Otherwise they wouldn't be there. They're afraid they're going to starve, or they're afraid they're going to be sick and die, or whatever. It may not be a conscious fear, it may be an unconscious fear, but it's a fear. Begin right then and there to understand that fear isn't personal, it's a universal claim. I knew you'd hear that, Christy. And fear in and of itself isn't a power. And you and I can withdraw the power from fear, and being one with God proved to be a majority. As you practice this in one case after another, you will begin to find yourself within a group. And there you will know that most of the people have come together because of fear. I mean, if you think of our script and kid classes. Eventually they will come together to learn about God, Monday nights. After they have overcome the fear. Eventually they will be interested in learning about God after they have overcome the fear. This is why Barbara was saying that, that you got to do the script and kid work before you can get into the fourth dimension. Up to that point, they come because of fear. Okay, that's all I say. He's very clear that the fear has to be removed before people, can climb into the fourth dimension. So we have a bit of a conundrum here, don't we? Because if we're going to heal ourselves, we have to be in the fourth dimension, but we can't get into the fourth dimension if we have fear.
You know what though, for me, what my experience has been, I used to look for the complete removal of fear. That I wasn't going to ever feel fear again in my life, and that's what my kid was looking for. Absolutely no fear in my life at all. And then what I've realized is fear is part of the human condition. And when I have that instant of knowing the difference, that it has no power, that's the healing. Mm-hmm. It's not a permanent healing, it comes up. But for me, the wisdom is knowing in that moment it has no power. And that might last for an hour. Mm-hmm. And if another one comes up, then in that next moment, I have to know the same thing. Mm-hmm. And see, I was looking for a permanent eradication of fear, and to this point, I haven't found it, but it's just little bits of like, I know what to do when the fear comes up, and that's the healing in that moment. And then it might go for a day and I have no fear. And then it might come out of the blue, and like when we were up in Yosemite, I hadn't had fear come up in a long time, and we were driving up to this point, it was 8,700 feet, and Mike was driving, and it was on the edge. You guys know you've been there, and there's no guardrails, and it was like, it just came up. Mm-hmm. And all I could do in that moment was acknowledge that fear was there and sit there and do the work. And it lasted the whole duration of, but I just knew it was there, and I just knew the truth, it has no power, and I just knew the truth, and it has no power. And it just, I had to do that for like the whole time I was in the car, and then when we got up to the point, I was okay, but then when I got back in the car again and was driving down, I had to do the work again, because it's just what came up. So I don't know why I have that.
Cal was doing it too. I was driving. I had to do that work when Mike was driving too.
But I don't know what Joel's definition of the fourth dimension is. But the way that I articulate it, because of my AA training, is that as time has gone on the past few years, I have my relationship with time has changed, and there are periods that I believe that I'm experiencing the fourth dimension. Like you were saying, see, I want the big cosmic flash, and then I'll never come back. And then I'll be able to walk around and be bulletproof or transparent or at least psychedelic. But what has happened is that I get to spend more and more time in it's not a non-fear state, but it's in a different relationship with myself and what's around me.
There's peace there.
Yes.
Yeah, there's peace.
Yeah.
In that moment, there's peace.
Yeah. Because for me, what it's been is that the experience of a moment is expanded, or the experience of the day has gotten like really long. Like this morning was the first time I'd been up at 5:30 with him in a long time, and the day has been endless again. I've been afraid too.
Lee, can I jump in here?
Sure, please do.
Can you hear me or am I breaking up?
No, you're fine now.
Okay. I was just thinking when she was talking about going off the cliff, we're saying that the spirit has no power. And I'm thinking, in that situation where she was afraid in the car, fear also had no purpose. Because the fear was not going to save her from going over the cliff.
Yeah.
And it just makes more sense to me to say it that way, that it has no purpose. It's at least serving no purpose. But I think there's almost a feeling like if I don't worry about something, then it's bound to happen. So if I'm not afraid that we're going to go over the cliff, then we're bound to go over the cliff. Am I making any sense to you?
You were up until that last point. I mean, I hear what you're saying. I understand it. I hear what you're saying, and you've got the other shoe's gonna drop syndrome. Or if I talk about it, it happens.
You sure you're not Jewish?
Yeah, fear certainly has no power, and it has no purpose. But it used to have a purpose.
Yeah.
But I've been with people driving where I felt fearful and I had to say something. You know, this makes me uncomfortable. You're driving so fast. Could you please slow down? And that there it did serve a purpose. I mean, at least I needed to have them slow
The
down.
purpose of fear is to keep you alive.
Right.
I mean, it has a purpose. It's grossly misapplied. But she could have asked him to slow down.
I was going pretty slow.
No, you know what? He was driving great.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Just
no, it was
entirely
all my dumb little mind was
Yeah.
So that it was
I was assuming that she was okay with his driving. I didn't factor that in.
You don't know Michael as well as the rest of us.
the opportunity.
I assumed that he was driving insanely.
Yeah.
Spiritual.
I was driving.
The adult was driving.
But I got to tell you, 2 years ago I couldn't have drove that. I used to have so much fear in heights that you had to hold up something to block the view. So I mean that is a huge growth for me. I used to feel like I was sliding off the cliff, and it's gone. I was driving. I mean, it just was fun. It was actually fun to drive. It was weird. So
Here's a couple more that he said. First one, reminder, you were talking earlier, it says, the moment you realize that fear isn't a power, you've taken the sting out of it and made it ineffective, inoperative, and you've set a person free in their spiritual identity, or in your case, you've set yourself free in your spiritual identity when you recognize that. He said, we need to lose the fear of external power. But if I tell you you are gripped with fear and need to overcome it, I put you deeper into it. If I tell you you are gripped with fear and that's foolishness because fear has no power, fear isn't a thing, fear isn't a condition, then that fear is lifted from you. No other way.
say it again.
You heard the part, if I tell you you need to overcome the fear. You are gripped with fear and you need to overcome it, I put you deeper into it. He's now made fear real. And set you up in a conflict with it, told you to fight it, to overcome it. He's given you power in that, okay? But if I tell you you're gripped with fear, and that's foolishness because fear has no power, fear isn't a thing, fear isn't a condition, then that fear is lifted from you. And in no other way, again, he says.
Roosevelt. And the only thing we have to fear is itself.
Never tell them to stop fearing, never tell them there's nothing to fear because they wouldn't be fearing if they could accept that. But silently within yourself smile and realize the nature of fear as nothing, as powerless. Now look at that with respect to kid work. Never tell yourself there's nothing to fear because you wouldn't be fearing if you could accept that part of you, okay? Or that kid part of you. But silently, within your spiritual adult, smile and realize the nature of fear as nothing is powerlessness, okay? That's the reassurance stuff. There's some kid work in here. Think about it.
I think that's why my experience with AA was so powerful in the beginning, because my mom always reflected my fear, and she always increased my fear, and I could never bring anything home, any of my own fears home, because it was like just, you know, she was just...
Pour gasoline on it.
Yeah, exactly. So I needed it to be quiet. Whereas in AA, the healing just was just so wonderful, because I could come in and be angry or be upset or be pissed or be sad or cry or whatever, and the whole room wouldn't like react to it. You know, it would just dissipate.
Everybody just says, oh yeah.
Yeah.
No power.
Next.
AA is so wonderful. AA knows that there's no power in any of that.
Right.
I mean, you don't need to drink over that. AA knows there's no power in any of your rage or your fear or your anger or your sadness or anything. I mean, the consciousness there, this level kind of, AA is just so wonderful. You know, they don't read your script. You know, probably there's less script reading in AA than anywhere else in the world. I mean, what we do is accept you as you are and tell you you'll be fine. You stick around, come back, keep coming back. You know, no rejection in AA. And no matter what you do there, short of physically attacking somebody, everybody says, it'll be all right, keep coming back. And the message you get is that they're not afraid of it. It's got no power. Mm-hmm. So we withdraw the power from all that stuff in AA. You know, there really is. Maybe Hawkins was right when he said AA's got a 540.
Yeah. The consciousness seems to be, you'll be fine, but I'm going to die.
That's true, though. You can go, that's true.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
yeah, that's why it works.
Yeah.
That's why it's been around for 75 years.
Such a wide margin of acceptance.
Yeah. Fireman Dick used to say, we take anybody, and I used to quietly think, yeah, if we didn't take anybody, there'd be nobody here, because there was no entrance criteria that any of us could have passed. You know, we're also weird and sick and screwed up when we come in.
It's probably one of those phrases that made him so endearing, you know, in the morning meetings. Yeah, we'll take anybody here, and you felt accepted, just his voice and his demeanor was just so accepting. Even if you feel like a piece of shit, you know, you're welcome.
He says there isn't any situation that will not respond to the understanding that underneath that condition is fear. We all fear to be annihilated. We fear the extinction of our life.
We fear what? What was the last line?
The extinction of our life. So he was pretty familiar with what script was. He just didn't have a problem with it himself. He was, I have no idea what his first 40 years were like, but from his first experience on, he apparently was just transcendent of script. So, you know, but he certainly is really clear about fear and fear of death. And as much of that as I want to read, I'm done. Just good stuff, you know. I'm not sure how that becomes useful yet, as far as, yeah, the problem is, yes, there's a healing consciousness in the script class, and there's a healing consciousness in Christie's workshops, and people get lifted out of their scripts and kid work. I mean, when they, in their Wednesday night kid shop, people get lifted out of it by being there, and that's why they come. And that's why they feel good, and that's why they come back. And yet those healings aren't permanent. Because the person themselves must have enough spiritual development gear to be aware in the moment of exactly what he says, of the powerlessness of fear, but more than that, of the powerlessness of everything. And the answer is that there's no power in anything external. The power is in your own inner being. Remember a year ago when you had that moment where you were completely fearless. Remember that?
Yeah. It's been so a long time.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But you know, that's one of the promises that she made, like that was like her motto, Barbara, you know, it's what she would say, the kid's descriptive fantasy work, knowing the truth will set you free. And
Jesus said.
Yeah, and it's just, I just, you know, at least from my experience right now, it just seems like, yeah, you know, when the fear comes up, knowing the truth in that moment, I'm set free. And then when it comes up again, knowing the truth in that moment sets me free, you know, and then what happens is that groove gets a little bit less and less, and the next thing you know, that the same outer, you know, appearance is being projected, and it's like, wow, not a ripple, you know, and because you've practiced it so many times.
And it just all goes away, and then you find an area that happens much less frequently, so you haven't worked on that groove yet, you know.
So then, new record comes up.
Yeah, there's another groove over there, but nobody's played that song. You know, they're not playing that song. You know, all the songs that they play every day we've dealt with, right? I mean, we've even dealt with the weekly songs. You know,
only the goodies.
There's a song they play on leap years.
I've been doing something that's completely new, right? And that's come up. It's something that I haven't experienced, and I have gotten a profound respect for the conditioning that, you know, easing up on all the work, you know, like reading in the morning, at night, and I listen to a lot of tapes, and easing up on that, the conditioning is so compelling out there about all these lies that I just have a real profound respect for it. It's like I can't let up.
Joel says that you don't, he never got to the point where he didn't need to do protective work.
I really get that.
Yeah, I mean, Joel was probably more clear than most of us.
So I started, you know, doubling and tripling back up because it's, there it is. You know, it's a demon all the time. I just really experienced that, you know, like, wow. I started firing up the tapes all the time, and I'm at home now.
I noticed that too for me. I've been doing a lot of work at work, and I took off a few days. And it's just like, I could feel it. I mean, I could feel a difference.
You feel a knot in the gut and think, what the hell's this about? Wow. Keep vigilant. Really, it's just vigilance.
Yeah, but the vigilance is the result of the amount of work you do. And the fact that you're listening to tapes all that time is what keeps you vigilant. Listening to tapes rather than watching the news.
Right.
I mean, I listen to a lot of Joel every day, and I never watch the news, you know, or sitcoms or you know, stupid television programs, you know, and
You don't have a TV at all?
We got rid of the cable boxes.
That's
We
great.
watch movies sometimes when I'm around, but no, it's been a year.
You want to see us, huh?
well, CSI is different. Certainly no scripted in CSI.
After a while, I don't miss it at all. I couldn't do it anymore. It's just too sensitive. Just couldn't do it. I just didn't want to pay the price anymore. But still, I eased up on how much I was listening to Eckhart Tolle and stuff, and so now I'm playing it all night again. We're playing it all night again. Because it's just amazing.
I like TV.
I couldn't watch it like a lady.
That's great. I'm pretty amazed at how I used to just have to watch TV, all the time, and I mean a long time ago, and it's one of those promises, it's one of those things that was kind of just taken from me. It's like interest in selfish things, are just, they leave, and I'm really happy about that because it was sucking the life out of me. And I'm just interested in other things, just bottom line. I'll throw it on, here and there, but it's not something that I'm hiding from life, in the TV, which is what I was doing.
You don't want to do that, and you don't want to watch the types of programs that are reinforcing scripted kid, sitcoms and Geraldo type shows and the soap operas and news and all that stuff. So, unfortunately, it's getting to where you can't watch anything anymore because all the drug advertisements. The primary thing being advertised right now is drugs to help you with this, that, or that. There's a huge message going on, being dumped on the world about the power of disease causers and the power of drugs. There's a huge, everybody's going to die of disease pretty soon, everybody's more and more and more reading it, and
I have to tell you, I learned something about advertising. On television, there's something called fill and content. Fill are the shows. Content are the advertisements. That's what it refers to. So they fill enough to keep you watching for the content. I went, whoa.
I muted the commercials every show.
yeah.
It's my little trick.
Yeah, most commercial breaks in movies nowadays are 5 minutes. The commercial breaks, so they can give you 5 1-minute
Now,
pieces of content.
at Agape, they would say, no, watch the news, or when you read the paper, but know the truth. That's an opportunity for you to practice, of knowing the truth. Yeah.
Yep. There are major practice.
Yeah.
I don't want to sit there and practice. I want to be entertained sometimes.
Yeah.
There's a show called Man vs. Wild that I watched when I was back in South Carolina. And I don't think there's any script in it. It's just this one guy, and they drop him in the middle of nowhere, and he finds his way out, and he shows you how to do it, and it's pretty cool. I like it. That's one of those that I like.
Yeah.
On the other hand, Hell's Kitchen is script incarnate. Script incarnate. Insanity.
I think we're wandering from healing fear, so let's get quiet. I think. Anything else that comes up, jump in. Okay, thanks for coming. I love y'all. See you soon.
Good night, everybody.
Night, Christy. Glad you're here.